Right, so my name's Nathan Oakley and I'm here with Adrian Hoax. We'll get rolling by hopefully getting a bit of information about you and exactly what it is that you do. So,
Oh, dear me, that's difficult. Depends on the day.
well, just give a person who's never experienced anything to do with Adrian Hoax a brief overview of what it is to be Adrian Hoax and what it is you do.
Well, I'm married. I have 10 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. I live in London. Now, then, what do I do? That's quite difficult to answer because it's manyfold. I used to run 2 local churches in the North London area. Now, I don't do that, but I'm still part of the community that did it. I now run several companies. We have what's called Phoenix Community Care, which is a care company that looks after UAMs, which I'm sure most people won't know what that is, but it's an unaccompanied minor, somebody in the country without parents or guardians, usually from a war situation, usually around 16 or 17, although we do have some what's called vulnerable 18-year-olds. We house them, look after them. I employ probably about 15 plus staff. So we employ social workers and people like that, and then we work with those. We also run what's known as an independent sector foster care agency, and at the moment I think we've got about, well, altogether between the unaccompanied minors and so on, we've got about 35 young people in placement at the moment. So basically with the foster care agency, we recruit the foster carers, train them, and then contract with local authorities.
Okay. And in terms of your religious beliefs?
Religious beliefs. Whenever anybody uses that word, I always usually say, well, I'm not religious, actually.
You're not religious?
I'm not religious. That's my usual stock answer to that question.
Okay.
I would say that Christianity isn't really a religion. People like to make it such, but actually it's about relationships.
Okay.
And communication. So I always dispute that phrase, really.
Well, religion's a tough phrasing.
Yeah,
Shall we say, what's your connection with the church?
Okay.
That's a much better one.
Partly, I mean, somebody asked me recently, I was on a tube flying back from, well, not on the tube, but I'd just come back from Hong Kong with a little Chinese girl, and she said to me, are you a Christian? I said, the trouble is with that phrase, it means many things to many people. So I said, actually, I'd rather answer it by saying I'm a follower of Jesus. So that's
Excellent
how I
answer.
would put the question, really.
Okay. The reason for this interview is about mainly the Lunar Tetrad. And in looking into this as a follower of science and of space, I've come to a conclusion through a tangent of videos, which has made me realise that at a young age I was in a conflict between what science taught and what I was taught in religious education.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you 3 statements, and I want you to sort of give me which you would say best describes your belief.
Yeah.
So statement A is that you believe in the scientific model. We live on a spinning ball that's rotating at 1,000 miles an hour, travelling around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, and this is the crucial bit. The sun came first and the earth came second. That's statement 1. Statement 2, God created the heavens and the earth, and on day 4 he gave us the sun. There's a lesser light that's the moon. Earth is God's footstool, his throne is above the firmament, and which separate the waters above from the waters below. So in that one, more importantly, the earth came first. Or C, a combination of the both.
Oh, that's really hard because you're making me say things that...
Of course, I don't want it to be a 3-hour interview, so I'm going to tie it down relatively early.
Yeah, exactly. Do I believe that God created the heavens and the earth? Yes. In an argument not so long ago on television with Richard Dawkins, he tells me how stupid I am, and he loves to do that. The reality is that there's all sorts of problems with that. Is what do we mean by day? You know, that's the first thing. I mean, we talk about the day of Queen Elizabeth II. Well, she's been on the throne longer than Queen Victoria. You know, so day can mean lots of things.
I mean, my understanding of that was back in religious education class, where they said that a day could be used as either a day, a week, or a year, depending on how the prefix was.
Or 1,000 years, or a million
precisely,
years.
Yeah, it goes on and on. So it's a period of time.
Yeah.
I think that's, would you agree that's the general
that would be my position, really.
I'd agree with that, based on how you read the text.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now we've got that out of the way, we'll get down to the nitty-gritty of why I called you in the first place. Did you actually see the lunar eclipse on Monday?
I actually, to tell you the honest truth, I got up at 3:15, looked out my window, could see the moon coming closer, and I thought, I'm very tired, I don't care, and went back to bed.
Fair enough. That's honest answer.
So I've looked at it on Facebook and on the television and in the newspapers, and I've looked at everybody else's photographs.
Which is fair enough, which is probably what most people did. I don't think a lot of people stayed until 3 or 4, 3 to see the beginning. And
Some
5
of my
to see
friends did, so I looked at their photographs.
That's it. I had loads of people on Facebook say how nice they liked the photos and all the rest of it, but presumably they weren't actually up. Okay, well, it was the 4th blood moon in a row, or so we're led to believe. Is there actually any reference in the Bible to this, as the media
yes,
have
there are.
suggested?
There are references to it. It talks about the moon should be turned to blood at the day of the Lord and so on. Yeah.
But actually, in regards to there being 4 blood moons, as the media call it, in a row, is there any actual reference to that?
I couldn't find any reference to that. There obviously are references of blood moons, but
Well, there's references to blood moons, but nothing that I could see that was referencing the lunar tetrad and the second coming and all of this. Hello.
no. I think the interesting thing is that it just talks about it in that general terms. That when the day of the Lord comes, it will be the moon will be turned to blood. But I looked at a lot of these things, and I hear lots of people talking about these kind of things. So if you look at the end of the world, or the end of life, the end of the return of Christ, if you like, there are all sorts of things. That there's the one about the moon. There's the one about wars. It talks about there'll be wars and rumours of wars. There's one about children and families. There's one about death of people. There's one about displacement, which is very up to date in terms of the news at the moment, because we're now suffering the worst displacement since World War II. And in fact, the displacement of people is greater than World War II at the moment. It's the greatest it's ever been. I mean, it's on the news all the time, what's happening with Europe. But actually, we're only seeing a tiny proportion, because actually, worldwide, it's bigger than it's ever been.
Okay.
So now, all of those things, if you ask me, what does that mean? Well, it seems to me that what it means is that life just is going on.
I'd agree with that.
People get married, children are born, and everybody doesn't take any notice, and then suddenly, and the Bible says that the end will become as a thief in the night. Well, you don't sort of expect a thief in the night and plan for it.
Not. No, there's not going to be any prediction for it.
Exactly, it just happens.
I mean, why do you think the media has overused A, the term blood moon, B, the fact that there's 4 in a row? Why do you think there is this sort of overuse of?
I think people love to think of doomsday and the end of the world and all of those things, and of course people make money out of it.
So it's a bit of hell sell, just playing on people's emotions.
I think because as human beings there is to use the word you used earlier on, there is a religious element to all of us, or a spiritual element to all of us, and so when the physical and the spiritual come into connection, the newspapers of course want to jump on it.
Right.
I think that's what really happens.
Okay. Have you heard or read anything about something called the lunar wave?
No.
No, I thought that would be your answer.
No, I haven't. What
okay.
is it?
Well, there's a current phenomenon where there's people actually filming the moon non-stop, and they've caught. Best way I can describe it is like a hum bar. You know how if you paused an old VHS cassette, you get a bar that sort of waved.
Yes, yeah.
Well, it's a very, very infrequent occurrence, but it's been caught. I think it's by either 3 or 4 different people out in the States who've been publishing these videos of. I will add to the conjecture if I say this, but there's no other way of describing it. Portraying it as though there's another image being superimposed over the top of the moon, and they catch this. Like I say, a hum bar that's creeping over it. Again, could be complete folly, could be total nonsense. I didn't know if it had crept into the media.
I haven't seen it.
No?
The only thing, going right back to your first question on the science of stuff.
Yep.
Recently, and I wouldn't like to be an expert or anything, in fact, I confess that a friend of mine gave me a book entitled how to teach your dog quantum physics.
Okay.
Really fascinating. However, it does strike me that when I look at quantum physics,
It's all theoretical.
yes, but there's all sorts of things that scientists are really having problems explaining.
Absolutely,
And it's
yeah.
like you go, hang on a minute, I thought you got all this tied down. Of course, when I talk to people like Richard Dawkins again, he would, science will find the answer, we've definitely got it, there is no God, which just makes me laugh. I mean, I think he's a very clever guy. He's probably a very good scientist. I think when it comes to theology and things about God, he's still in the kindergarten. But
It's quite satanic in a way. It's trying to convince your average Joe that there is no God. That's pretty bold stuff.
well, it's pretty boring stuff, really.
I don't dispute it. You can baffle people with bullshit,
Yeah,
bore them, and they'll switch off a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how I see it. I think, to quote an old friend of mine, George Canty, he used to say, it's just a misery.
Moving on a little bit, did you actually watch the moon landings back in 1960?
Oh, I did, yes.
You did?
Yeah.
What are your feelings on the moon landings?
I thought it was fascinating. I actually remember my mother telling me when I was a little kid, they'll never put a man on the moon. But
I'd agree with her today.
you would?
I would, yeah.
You don't think they did it?
Absolutely not.
You believe the American...
Faked it. Totally. I still think they are doing it. I still think they're faking a lot of stuff out in space.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll give you an example that I only just came across
That's
recently.
really funny.
A lot of people will laugh when they hear this sort of stuff. Was about 95. There was a documentary about aliens out in the shuttle Endeavour mission to fix Hubble. And what they showed on camera, and this is what lots and lots of people saw on TV at the time, with these little things flying around the tether that got away. And there's a whole load of hype about aliens, and you sort of roll your eyes and think, what a load of nonsense. I went back to that clip because lots of people have been saying that the Chinese missions... Oh, how many people have landed on the moon in your view?
I don't know. I thought it was about half a dozen, I thought.
So no idea that China have been.
That wouldn't surprise me if...
But you don't know.
No, I don't know.
Most people don't know that.
No.
But China have been to the moon. We just don't get showed their rather terrible footage that looks really fake because we'd all figure it out pretty quickly. So no one knows that China have been to the moon, but they have.
Right.
But their footage is absolutely terrible. If you think the Americans' footage was okay, theirs is an absolute joke. But they've let out little bubbles from their helmets, and all of the conspiracy theorists and flat earthers getting a big twist over this and say they're faking the whole thing and that there's bubbles coming out. So I went back to the old alien footage of this tether with a different light, and when you look at it with bubbles in your mind, you realise that what you're seeing is definitely not aliens, it's just a load of bubbles in a tank, which makes you think, So, without boring you and everybody watching this about the massive amount of stuff that sort of disproves the moon landings.
The only thing is that I would say, in defence of moon landings, which I'm not here to defend, is that a friend of mine actually met and talked with one of the, and I forget which one, but one of the guys that was on one of the initial landings.
All right.
And it was really, I think it was the one who sort of played golf and which one was that one? I don't remember.
I don't know the missions back to front.
But he told him some really amazing stuff that didn't get into the press.
Right.